Hey guys, welcome to another DeFactO podcast show. I'm Utkarsh Dev, and this is Unveil, where we talk about the unspoken and unrecognized things of the world. And today I'm going to talk about the downfall of the company Apple Incorporated. Now, we all know that Apple has been the leader in the technological market and also been one of the biggest companies of the world, thanks to its inventions that have changed completely the way we live. The Macintosh that first introduced the graphical user interface, which made computing easy for everyone. Then came the iPod, which the first digital music player that completely changed the music industry. Then came the iPhone, which also changed the phones market and shifted it to a little smarter market where phones became more smarter than the BlackBerry bricks. So, the downfall of Apple actually starts from the 1984 incident when the Macintosh was introduced. Now, the Macintosh was priced high, $1,000, and during those times, $1,000 were a lot of money. We're talking about 1984, guys. 1984, $1,000 were a lot of money. And to put things in perspective, the price of gold in 1984 was $383. So that's how expensive the Macintosh was. It was thrice the amount of gold back then. Naturally, the Macintosh didn't sell that well, and Apple had to focus all its resources into developing and updating the Apple II, which was old. And with Microsoft releasing MS-DOS, that was quite cheap comparatively because MS-DOS was distributed to multiple developers like IBM. The Macintosh was completely derailed off the market. Now, Steve Jobs, he insisted many times, and this is not me partially speaking, even though I'm a fan of Steve Jobs, this is true. Steve Jobs insisted many times that the Macintosh should not be priced that high. But John Sculley, who was the CEO of Apple that time, had only one thing in his mind: money. Because he had come from PepsiCo, a company that sold soda water in a way. Now, soda water, you can't do much innovation in that. And so you need to think of ways to market it in such a way that revenue comes to you. But a company like Apple, a technological company, it's not just about marketing. It's about also what you give to the people who are going to buy the product. But John Scully could not understand that. John Scully only thought about money, and he priced the Macintosh at such a level that people could not buy it. And after that, the board of Apple uh, fired Steve Jobs. That's right, Steve Jobs was fired from his own company. Why was he fired? Well, people blamed the Macintosh fiasco directly on him because he kept pushing that Macintosh should be mass produced. Because obviously, Macintosh was the one that was going to change the world if only Apple had directed all its resources and put Macintosh at a reasonable price. But that did not happen. So the blame went on to Steve Jobs. The entire board unanimously voted out Steve Jobs, and he was kicked out of his own company. And after that, Apple went into a complete decline. John Scully was also fired, replaced by another CEO, Gil Amelio, who nobody talks about, because during that time, Apple was declining. People vaguely know what were the products that were released between 1984 and 1999 when Steve Jobs came back to Apple. But, but because Apple was going into a downfall when it only focused on pricing. It only focused on profits. But a tech company does not work like that. Only Steve Jobs could understand it. And after 1999, when Steve Jobs came back, all the revolutionary products that changed the world, that brought Apple to its position where it is right now, were released when Steve Jobs was there in Apple. The iPod, the iPhone, the MacBooks with magnetic chargers, the MacBooks with such a fluid user interface. So many revolutionary products released only during that tenure. Unfortunately, Steve Jobs is not here with us anymore, and his entire team, except Jonathan Ive and a couple of few people, has been replaced. And they only think of profit. Apple was always considered a company whose products can only be bought by people who have a lot of money. That's true. But during those times, Apple made products that were 4 years ahead of their current time, maybe 5 years. Take for example the iPhone 5. The iPhone 5 was the last iPhone that Steve Jobs himself unveiled in 2011. The iPhone 5 had a very slim design for phones during those times. It had a small connector which most phones were lacking during those times. The lightning connector, which you must have heard. Its speakers were phenomenal. The phone's camera was phenomenal. The processor was phenomenal. And even 4 to 5 years later, people who were using iPhone 5 were very, very satisfied with it. The iPhone 5s a year ago or 2 years ago was still relevant, and it came out in 2012. So, innovation, a word, was directly synonymous to the company Apple. But nowadays, Apple has just become a company that just extracts money out of their buyers and gives them nothing, literally nothing. For the same price, you can get a better laptop in Windows with better hardware than you can get with an Apple MacBook, because Apple keeps increasing the prices for no reason at all. Take iPhone 10s. It is just for rich people. You If you see it, it looks good. Apple's build quality has always been the best in the market, and props to that. But the features, the processing power, the restricted Apple to Apple connection, that's something that it's not worth it, to be honest. Back in those days, Apple was still quite expensive, but it was worth paying the price because you were getting something that was nowhere else in the market. And me, being a technological enthusiast, can guarantee you this. If Apple goes on the current pace it is going right now, and Google and Microsoft go on the current pace they're going right now, it's not long that Google or Microsoft will take over Apple, and soon Apple will be down, way down than many technological companies. The number of units that they're selling is actually not a huge number. So now I would conclude my talk show and just end it by saying that the people at Apple, if you don't do anything soon, Apple will be history actually. With that, I'd like to conclude my talk show. Thank you so much for having the patience to 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 listen this podcast and stick to the end of it. If you like what you listened, then leave a like, share this video, and please comment more topics for Unveil, more topics for the other show, Auto Talks, more topics for the weekly podcast, and if you're new, then subscribe. So thanks for watching, guys. This is me, Utkarsh Dev, and you just listened to the Unveil.